on stage, joining us, this would be the topic, the resilient core, which is actually all about balancing domestic momentum with global volatility. So here, when we talk about economic resilience, that has now become a defining capability of our times, this something now it becomes a little more specific when we talk about the major contours of what defines when it comes to the future of India. So let's put that in focus as far as when we speak of economic resilience, the resilience core, that has become the defining capability of our times, not just as a defensive reflex, but also as an operating discipline. And this is where it comes into focus when we speak of India's domestic momentum that remains strong, and yet it unfolds against a volatile global backdrop that is now shaped by geopolitical tensions, inflation cycles, and capital flow shifts. And across healthcare, capital markets, industrial manufacturing, consumer sectors, leaders must now balance efficiency with durability, speed must now be matched with stability, and scale must now be aligned with sustainability. So resilience today demands a disciplined capital allocation, agile supply chains, and leadership that anticipates shock rather than reacts to them. The question is no longer how to grow in favorable conditions, but how to sustain growth when external variables are uncertain. So let's move on and talk about our next set of guests who will be joining us here on stage. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, in welcoming Prashant Tandon, co-founder and Chief Executive Officer, Tata 1mg, Arpita Vinay, Senior Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, Spark Capital Private Wealth Management. Please also join us on stage, Praveena Rai, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, Multi-Commodity Exchange of India, MC Kicks. And also, we are joined by Nishant Arya, who is the Vice Chairman and Managing Director, JBM Group. Well, Aisha Farideh will be joining us here on stage to moderate this next set of panel that now we are looking at. And of course, this would be a discussion to look forward to.
We have a nice mix of sectors here. And I was just thinking about, when you have the stalwarts from healthcare, pharma, digital health, wealth, commodity markets, mobility, manufacturing, as well as infrastructure, you can't help but think about how these sectors come together and how they shape up India's next decade. So with that thought, let me welcome on board our panelists. Thank you, all of you. Your mics are right next to you, so if you can just take them. Let's talk about building India's next decade economy and how health, capital markets, as well as infrastructure as sectors can really be the next growth engines. Praveena, if I could come to you, India's growth story now depends on multiple engines coming together. You, from your perch right now, where do you think the next set of opportunities lie for India? And how is it, Praveena, that your sector can actually contribute to India's next decade?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. A lot of the conversation today morning was around that. We've had the big decade of IT services growth. We've seen the momentum that GCCs have brought to the table for us, and some of the recent announcements on really how we will drive data centers and many such policies, the national energy policy, the critical minerals policy. Many of these really start giving the signals on what the next big growth areas are going to be. And these not just look at what the country requires, but also as in what the people require, but also as a country what we require to manage the global environment we are in the midst of today. So when we give that sort of security lens is really where a lot of this plays out. And the geopolitical environment creates volatility. Now, this volatility is immediately reflected in the Indian markets as well, and rightfully so, because we are part of global trade. And when that happens, we should have the ability to optimize it, to localize it, right? It does get localized because there is a local demand supply. We are a large country. If you look at gold, we are the second largest market in the world. If you look at energy, we are very large. If you look at many of the metals like aluminum and copper, again, we are significant with a lot of local refining, ore to refining to, upstream, downstream infrastructure. So localizing it is really the role that markets play to manage the risk associated with the global environment, and look at driving resiliency through the hedging and risk management framework. So the opportunity exists. How do we drive our delivery to that opportunity is really where this comes into picture.
Mr. Paramasivan, the industry that you, or rather the sector that you represent, really plays a pivotal role in India's next chapter, right? Tell me, when you look at infrastructure, how far we've come in the next decade to where we can go. And now with the government's thrust on infrastructure, we're seeing that all around us. Where do you think the next opportunity lies when it comes to infrastructure?
Last one decade, I must say, is a decade of infrastructure on a consistent basis. The infrastructure allocation had gone up 5 times over the last one decade. And this year also there is an increase by about 10%. And government recognizing the need that post-COVID, there have been a pushback, and but infrastructure continues to be the focus area as it generates employment, and it generates 3 times of the value of the jobs which are awarded. And with the focus on the fiscal consolidation on the one side and the infrastructure push on the other side, government is really focusing on delivering world-class value on the infrastructure side. Going forward, when you look at it, if you look at the various budget announcements and other associated announcements, the country is looking at continued focus on connectivity with more and more focus where a reasonable scale has been achieved in the road sector. Railway sector still miles to go, and increased focus on the freight corridors and high-speed railways, all that. Apart from that, last about nearly 1 decade, there have been less activity in the hydro segment. Hydro, irrigation, water will continue to have a push. With increased activity around the borders, there is need to continue to spend more on the defense infrastructure. This will be the focus area going forward, apart from government's requirement and industry's requirement to push to the international markets to create scalability for the companies and also visibility to the Indian environment.
Nishant, your business derives off from infrastructure. Tell me, where is the next big opportunity as mobility itself is seeing so much transition and so much breakthrough pretty much on a daily basis?
No, I think we are all at a very opportune time where the mobility sector is in for a very large transition, and especially large focus on zero emission technologies like electric, hydrogen, amongst others. There has been great growth opportunity, seeing that the whole Indian economy is getting integrated with the current approach. So from generation to consumption, when we are generating solar power and other sources of renewable energy, which are feeding into areas of electric vehicles, and really seeing that the EV technology, when we are clubbing to this, also looks at the core technology base of semiconductor, power electronics, and then moving up to lithium batteries, critical minerals, and they are all power guzzlers on one end. On the other end, technology is playing a very critical role. So I think this is a decade of manufacturing. So technology driving value becomes very important. So from 15, 16% going to 25%, 30% is something which will be a great opportunity. And with the new free trade agreements, because in today's day and age, competitiveness is very critical for you to scale up, and scale and competitiveness go hand in hand. So multiple new opportunities open up. I was in Germany, I just came back today morning, so we were just discussing yesterday that how multiple German companies and other European companies are keen to set up manufacturing bases in India to cater to not only India but the global south, and also ensuring the competitiveness in their home markets. So how looking at the global framework and a totally different lens with which you are able to get into the international markets is very important, so that the scale, size, technology, competitiveness, and with the 1.6 million engineers we produce today in our country, which is one of the largest in the world, gives us a fantastic base to build upon. And that's where a different element comes in of the kind of incentives being given on DLI and RDI, which comes in. And I think areas like these, where we started with Make in India, but how starting from making in India to create in India, design in India, and India becoming the brain of the world, where Indians are contributing to this worldwide, but how many Indian IPs do we create, and how many Indian tech companies we create which are becoming the global powerhouses. So I think this is a decade which will transition and transform India into a global technology leader, demonstrating scale and size in a very frugal, agile, and nimble manner.
Vikrant, when you talk about India, India has been known as the land of Ayurveda, where the pharmaceutical generic hub for the world. You represent an industry which has a big potential and a big contribution to the rest of the world. Where do you think are the structural gaps still, where one can sort of catch up on momentum?
See, in India, we have a demographic challenge. Yeah. It's not a small population. So I think on one side, the burden of the disease is increasing rapidly. And it is actually shifting the gears from the acute to chronic. So while we see ourselves very capable and we have been we have eradicated many of the diseases, and at least the infectious diseases, we have become very capable. I think we need to strengthen ourselves in terms of fighting the chronic disease, which is just coming, and it is a tsunami of the chronic disease. If you try to see whether it is a thyroid disorder, whether it is diabetes, more than 100 million patients, obesity, 250 million patients, hypertension in millions. So we see that as the aging is increasing, more and more chronic diseases are coming. So I'm very happy that government is trying to fill this gap and also balancing the act from the acute to the chronic. Coming back to the company like us, like Novo Nordisk, I think we feel responsible, because is getting the access of innovation fast and early. And we try to do that, at least our part of the job, getting latest and the best medication to India. And we have done that recently even in the field of obesity, bringing semaglutide, whether for diabetes, obesity, and also orals. But on the other side, the responsible part is also the accessibility, affordability, along with the quality. And I think I can proudly say that when it comes to products like insulin, we are offering in terms of affordability, which is one of the cheapest in terms of the treatment which is there. But I would say the issue is not that we are able to provide the accessibility and affordability. I think the issue is about detection. Issue is about the prevention. And if that can be addressed with the help of doctors and healthcare professionals, I think that is the war which we need to fight together. But otherwise, I'm really very proud in terms of we being the pharmacy of the world. And I think the gates which are also shifting, the another gap is from pharmacy of the world to innovation part of the world. Like Prime Minister Modi says, Jai Vigyan and Jai Anusandhan. Getting into the innovation cycle for India is also very important. And we are also playing very strong part as far as India is concerned.
And when you talk about Prashant accessibility, you are getting his medicines quicker to all of us. But is India adapting to that model, Prashant?
I think the Indian model, it's bound to follow the rest of the world in terms of, see, as an individual, good health can propel you forward, bad health can drag you down. Same holds true for the economy. If you are an economy of healthy people, you move forward much, much faster. Now, what we see, and this is pretty interesting and important, is when a country reaches a certain level of consumption power, the per capita income goes above a threshold, the consumption of healthcare and the investment in your own health and wellness grows materially more. So if you are growing, so and the number I think is around $10 to $15,000 if your annual income is beyond that threshold. From that threshold increases your spend on your health and wellness almost by 5 to 8x. And in India, there's going to be almost a 2.5 to 3x increase in the number of households that are at the cusp. So when we see that happen, these consumers are going to seek better healthcare. They are going to seek better wellness. And this is happening for India, at least at a time when there's a major technology shift that is also underway. So that impacts not only people who can afford, but everyone else, because fundamentally data sciences, digital health, digital access is redefining the basic norms of productivity, how many doctors you need, how much of the healthcare expenditure. 70, 80, 90% of the healthcare expenditure is when the bad thing has already happened. But if you are able to catch it early and address it early, it's a more affordable model of healthcare. It's a more accessible in terms of from a price point, people are able to get there, and then you are able to get it where you are rather than having to make the long trip to the city to get your healthcare. So this shift in the healthcare model, the digital access to preventive healthcare and data-driven healthcare, and now with AI kind of changing the rate at which we are able to understand the health profile of a consumer and where the trajectory is going, and new financing models coming in, I think we are in the process of creating a healthcare model that will be probably the healthcare model for the future, not just for India, but at least for most of the global south. And it's an opportunity that will always grow at, if the economy is moving at X, I expect healthcare to at least grow at 1.5 to 2x.
And Arpita, the industry that you represent will price all of that in as of tomorrow. But tell me, when you talk about India's capital markets, 10 years hence, do you think we're in a good stead? Because we've talked about the various sectors present to your right and my right, and what the future of India is going to be in the next decade. Do you think the health of equity markets would also grow leaps and bounds, as would all these other sectors?
Good afternoon, great to be here, and absolutely. I think in a country that has abundance of land and labor, the thing that comes between us and growth is access to capital. And in that sense, financial services is the lifeblood of any economy. I think what has changed this decade is we are not at the mercy of foreign institutional investors. You know the numbers, but despite a massive 2.5 lakh crore outflow last year, it's the confidence of the domestic savers which kept the capital markets, depth, breadth, and resilient. Yeah. And that's actually the source of capital to most industries, whether in the equity capital market space or the debt capital market space. So absolutely, for sure, I think Mr. Martin Sorrell spoke about it earlier. World Bank, last year largest economy, this year fastest growing last year, fastest growing this year, fastest growing in the coming year as well. I don't think we get the adequate representation from a capital market point of view. So the growth from here, obviously without sounding like an unhinged bull, is going to be one way, but more in terms of depth and breadth as well, more in terms of innovation as well, more in terms of being able to provide access to capital to the companies that need it beyond beyond the top 200 ones of them. That's really where the animal spirit is. So yes, for sure.
That's a very important point. And Mr. Paramasivan, because yours is a very capital-intensive industry and capital is getting costlier, I wanted to understand, do you think that one needs to prioritize capital allocation more as a country into sectors such as yours?
While capital allocation is a key requirement, but construction is by and large self-financing as far as the companies are concerned. Most of the projects have their project advances, and only where there are payment-related issues, we are getting into capital issues. Otherwise, substantially capital is required for the equipment-related expenditure, which every project will have its own uniqueness. That is a key requirement. Other than that, if you look at it, the capital required is more in the form of a non-fund-based facilities for most of the construction companies. And therefore, on the capital allocation side, especially EPC companies may have much less of a constraint than a concessioner, where the capital and associated returns becomes a key issue.
Vikrant, would you want to add to that? When it comes to your industry, how do you think a country like India, with the vast scope that we were just discussing, should prioritize capital allocation when it comes to public health?
I think when it comes to the capital allocation for public health, it used to be quite low in India. I think post-signing the Sustainability Development Index group, our capital investment as well as the investment by large, by all means, have increased. It used to be 1.5% in terms of the GDP, and now it is actually crossing 3%. And also, we see a lot of capital flow even in the private space in healthcare, health tech, and as well as in med tech. And I think that becomes extremely important because the way India is actually growing and the way the disease management is coming, it is also becoming an epicenter not only for manufacturing, but for also research and development, and also for med tech and health tech. So overall, we see a large deployment, and I think this has to continue quite a lot if we need to arrest some of the burden of the disease in India. And we see this happening, at least if you just see the way, the e-channel or the e-pharmacy, the way the capital investment which is coming, you also see the investment which government has also allocated. I think that is phenomenal. And this will continue.
Praveena, when you talk about A, of course, there is about capital allocation, but B is also about the tech advancement. And who better to throw light on that, other than a platform like yours? Tell me, how much as a country do we need to evolve and invest in just the digital infrastructure, if I can call it that?
Yeah, so when they were both answering, I was just thinking to myself that one of the big areas of capital allocation actually should be technology.
Yes, absolutely.
And of course, he sort of wrapped up with talking about how technology is playing a role in pharma as well. Because if we look at really what we have as a country, in addition to the demographic in our favor, it is the fact that we can leapfrog with digital infrastructure and with technology. There is a lot of work we need to do in manufacturing. We are doing it. There's lots to be done in infrastructure. We are doing it. But these do take more time. With technology, you can create leapfrogs. You can sort of drive faster kind of growth by creating the right products and services that really people need. And we've seen this across the board, at least on the financial services side. And of course, we see it in fintech. We see it in the sort of e-commerceization of many sectors. And technology per se has many elements to it. One is to be ready for scale, to be super resilient. And resiliency is not just a technology thing, right? There is capital, there is people, there is design. I think he spoke about self-design. So all those elements start coming in. And today's buzz is, of course, AI. And are we going to just use large language models that have globally been launched and kind of lose ourselves somewhere in that space? Or we really create our own models, our own fit to purpose, fit to scale, Indian citizen scale kind of requirements that we have. So we've seen this play out. I mean, we've seen the success of UPI on the payments and banking side. We've seen the growth of capital markets, exchanges on the market side. And we don't feel it as technology driven, but finally, I think we're all fintechs. And the biggest competitive edge we bring to the table is what we do with technology.
Prashant, you managed to cash in on the tech opportunity quite ahead of time, and your entire business model is around it. Tell me, can AI and tech really accelerate India Inc.?
I think it's an imperative. If we do not have that, then we have lost the race already. So it's not a option for us to play or not. We have to, and we have to win this. India has actually a lot of things going its way right now. And for AI and technology, especially as I look at my sector, what is needed? You need a lot of energy, and I think fundamental work on ensuring energy is available. You need the digital infrastructure, which is now reasonably well set up. Then you need the talent, and then you need a lot of data. Now, for a country our size and our population, the amount of data that we generate, so starting from the fourth point, we have massive amounts of data. AI talent is coming and developing pretty fast in the country today. And the back-end stuff, which is the fundamental energy and tech infrastructure that is there, that's where the government is actively right now working or focusing on. So I think the opportunity is immense. We can't afford to miss it. And what the solutions that it will create are going to be transformative. At least in healthcare, it's quite clearly visible that the direction is that AI is going to fundamentally change how predictive, preventative, personalized healthcare actually takes shape. It's something that has been spoken for a long time, but it's possible with this level, this powerful technology that is now at our doorstep. So in our company, we are already doing a lot of work on this, but I think as a nation, this is high on agenda, and this should be high on agenda. Next week is the AI Summit in Delhi, and I'm sure this positive momentum it's only one-way street. I don't see it any option but to make it happen.
And Vikrant, I mean, just to add to that point that Prashant was making, that data perhaps is sacrosanct to pharma companies, right?
Absolutely, and right, what he mentioned, it's not only at this stage, right at the time of the drug discovery, till the delivery to the patient, and even in the patient outcome. And India is actually at the epicenter when it comes to the amount of data which can be generated. Now, if I look at my organization, Novo Nordisk, this is, can you imagine that we have got 1,000 people into drug data development sitting in Bangalore, trying to do the drug data development without the real R&D in the laboratories. So the research and speed to market is increasing phenomenally. Of course, there are drug failures, but the testing stage is actually accelerating so fast. And just in time, you get the research outcome, which used to take 6 months. Now you get the report for the submissions to the authorities quick and fast. And likewise, the authorities are judging that. Likewise, the doctors are generating wealth of data. And I think if India can leverage the kind of data which is getting generated, I think then we can have wealth of outcome which can be used for benefit of the health sciences, or you can say the health span of the population.
Nishant, the other thing I want to talk about with tech is the fact that more and more countries are pushing for localization. And who better than your company, really to talk about that? Be it manufacturing, be it pharma supply chains, infrastructure capability, localization is the key thread right now. Is self-reliance sort of strengthening resilience, you think? Or is it adding more dimensions to the supply chain?
No, I think it strengthens resilience in a big way, and we become quite independent. And at the same time, we are able to establish new paradigms in the industry where we are able to re-establish our core, and the nucleus evolves when you are able to localize and have, because localization doesn't happen without technology being inbuilt. So there we see that the huge focus upon competence, which is getting, so there are a lot of COEs getting built. And those COEs parallelly are fueling the opportunity to localize, in the given segments. And that's where we see that once we start localizing, we try and see that the level of manufacturing which is there keeps enhancing, because starting from assembly to manufacturing and then going to certain core technologies which are cutting across multiple sectors. So I think that is something which is very critical, and that is also very important for the country as a whole, because today with AI and other things, data being the new oil, we are all seeing that how that is enhancing the time to market. But at the same time, we have to understand that how value-added services and value-added products. So people are going through learning, relearning, unlearning in this process. So whilst they do that, they critically have to understand that what are the skills of the future and how AI coupled with such skill sets in manufacturing, in localization can be a game changer, making India the manufacturing capital of the world. And that is what is the target which we foresee, that in the next 10 to 15 years, if we are committed to this path, that would be the biggest game changer for India as a country across multiple sectors, and we would be able to establish multiple niche areas which are not available to many other countries because of our domestic consumption and also the current positioning with multiple free trade agreements which have been signed. So they open plethora of opportunities. So today itself we see that India is able to engage with multicultural and multi-product, multi-technology framework in different sectors. And I taking example like in our electric vehicle sector, we see that today we are engaging, we have almost 25 different technologies which we put together in an electric vehicle or the EV ecosystem for the customer to get really user-friendly experience and have a totally seamless understanding of what one is working with. So I think that is what has to be understood, where target sectors and target segments, once they are taken up, they can scale immensely and giving India pole positioning across the world. And I think that is what is important rather than focusing upon everything. And this will also enable the MSMEs to become very self-sustainable. And I feel that if you are self-sustainable, then sustainability drives scalability in that mindset. So I think that's critical from that standpoint, and also creates substantial value for people as the value-added services get enhanced. So disposable income for people would increase in a big way and would address the myth which is there in the market today for some people that with AI, with tech, is this making jobs redundant? It is just that the jobs, the roles, responsibilities and the know-how required is changing and evolving, and we have to see that how in a relevant manner we are doing so.
And Arpita, just to add to that, more than all the aspects that we've talked about, the demographic advantage that India has right now, I think it's important, and who would be better to talk about that than you? When you talk about capital markets, all that one hopes for is that the animal spirits, the entrepreneurial sort of, streak that India has right now, that should continue, right?
Right, absolutely. And I think in context of technology, it in some manner has been a game changer for financial services at the bottom end, access to credit, access to a formal banking financial system, all of that democratized through technology. Specifically in the industries that we are, that I'm a part of, which is ultra HNI, high touch industry, technology has got to enable business models where you're able to offer personalized advice at scale without having an army of people to do that. And what that means from from a business strategy as well, the kind of skill set, the kind of equipping, the kind of people that you end up having, the kind of systems that you end up having, very differentiated than what you've done in the past. One of the biggest differences between the bank and standalone platforms would be the access to information, because in banks you have a 360-degree view. In a platform like ours, you wouldn't. But someone mentioned we are reaping the benefit of the huge amount of effort that's gone into creating the digital public infrastructure. But because of that, with client consent, you actually are able, through an account aggregator system,
and building a business.
Building a
more
business through that,
importantly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Not a man versus machine, man and machine debate, more so for financial services. It's changed what, I think it's what could have taken decades of growth has come to us in a much shorter time because of the enablement that's been provided by tech. Yes.
And also the entrepreneurship,
Sure.
spirit as well, right? People such as you who have donned many hats in your career, but have built a business. You
Sure.
want the country to head that way.
I'm sort of glad you touched upon that. I've had a pretty conventional, from a very personal point of view, come from a small industrial town, the eldest of 3 daughters, started out in Tata Steel, a conventional career path, decided for whatever reason to get into financial services, and an MBA landed me at HSBC, and realized after a while it was an exciting run, but bitten by the entrepreneurial bug in terms of what was happening in the industry around me. Didn't have the courage to do it all alone. Got together with a few colleagues, and that was beginning of a journey which was very, very different from what I had thought life would be like. I totally, completely identify with the spirit, with the theme of the session that you have here today, resilience. Because 12 of the best years with colleagues in a capital-constrained environment, building a financial services brand from scratch, and over a period of time, and having had to walk away from that and rebooting and rebuilding in the last 2.5 years, has, it's been an exciting journey, and resilience, and in a very different and a personal note, is about handling what life throws at you, also anticipating what could come to you, and from an organization and from a business point of view, building those skill sets in advance. In that context, a lot of what is happening in technology, you've got to stay ahead of the curve. You've got to invest before it comes and hits you. And I think it complements all business models. So yeah, it's been technology or not in financial services, the journey to being an entrepreneur was from a straight-jacketed, professional banker has been a very exciting one.
Absolutely, and I would just wind up by saying that it's actually the agility of Indians and Indian businesses to actually stay on the course, stay on the path, and change with the times that really makes us truly Indian and truly resilient as well. But thank you, panelists. Great speaking with you and great getting insights on all of your sectors. Thank you.
Thank you so much.